vlogging and cooking. I have to do both, multitasking, bear with me. So I wanted to do a vlog, believe it or not, about Harry and Meghan. I never thought I would do that. The people are insane. I'm seeing them in the media all the time, and I just shake my head. But I had this bizarre epiphany, and I want to tell you about it. So believe it or not, my theory is Meghan and Harry might just be the most important people of this moment in history. They might be the most important people of this minute. Now, let me explain. I don't believe that there's been any more perfect example of critical theory, the thinking it entails, and how it can affect or infect anybody. I mean, we all know Harry was born with everything just given to him, dropped in his lap. Well, let's define what that means, though, right? So he's born royalty, money, power, fame. But what do we mean by everything when we say he had everything? Money, power, fame. Certainly he struggled to didn't have a very solid home life. Look at his parents. His mother murdered. All sorts of issues in the royal family. See, the truth is that being born into this world as mortal human beings, sinners in a fallen and sinful world, imperfect, in an imperfect world, that impacts all of us. It doesn't matter how rich or how poor, how weak or how powerful. The first time you get a really bad flu, it is awful. When you break a bone, it's terrible. When you get the chicken pox, when you have your tonsils out. I mean, any of the things that happen to most of us ordinarily as children, but any of the dangers of the world. Anybody's mother might be murdered in any neighborhood in the country under whatever circumstances. So really, Harry being human in this world did not protect him from any of that. I remember watching a news program about his service in the military. He was in Afghanistan, and he volunteered to go into combat situations because under the rules they would not make him. Now, it was kind of a fluff piece. I felt like maybe it was propaganda for the royal family, but if true, he did what any patriotic person might do. Go into battle and not know if you're going to come home or not. So, as the saying goes, you all put your pants on one leg at a time. What really makes him any different than any of us? But he is different from probably most of the people watching this, right? Because we were not born with those advantages that I aforementioned. Every human being born into this world doesn't know when they step out their front door if they're going to get run over by a drunk driver. That includes the wealthiest, the most powerful. If they happen to step out on the street, they're just as much at risk. They're mortal human beings. They bleed red, and we all suffer that. But the ordinary human being steps out in the street each day, going to work, doing whatever their duties are, with the fear that if they fail, if they lose their job, if they go a couple paychecks without getting paychecks, they injure themselves, or they get run over by a drunk driver and are killed, they have that fear of what happens to their family, what happens to their loved ones, who's going to take care of them, what condition will they end up in. That's the suffering, uncertainty of the world. Now that's what being born wealthy and powerful gets you out of. So that's what we mean, hopefully, when we say Harry was born with everything. Even had he died with his unit in Afghanistan, gunned down by terrorists, even if he took on 20 of them alone and was the next Chuck Norris before he died, he could do that knowing that his family wasn't going to starve to death or be homeless without him. Whoever his family and loved ones were, right at the time. He didn't have to worry about them. He had as much danger, risk to pain, suffering, death as the rest of us do, and yet he didn't have to have the fear of the other stuff because he was always being backed up by that money, that power, that fame. And so, as human as he is, he also was born with some very inhuman, or rather extra human, superhuman, special, unique support to whatever he did that always meant that the game was backed up, it was saved, and all of his loved ones were going to be fine, even though it didn't make the pain of suffering, misery, sickness, dying in combat any different, or loss when his mother died. Nevertheless, all those other concerns that have to follow with ordinary folk, Harry did not have that. Now this pork is looking really good, y'all. All right, so Harry was born with everything. Nothing that freed him from normal human circumstances or the human condition, but with everything that guaranteed that no matter what happened, the things and people that he cared about were going to go on. That's a completely different situation than you or I. And it is, I don't like to use the word privilege because now that carries all this loaded sort of connotation. It's a legacy handed down to him from his ancestors. And however you feel about the royals, those things get handed down because somebody earned them, somebody worked for them, somebody fought for them. Maybe they were just cleverer than other people, but somehow or another, you don't accidentally, the world is not King Ralph. John Goodman does not become your king by accident. Somewhere in the lineage, something happened. But that's a whole separate issue. But this is what makes it the most important, the Harry thing, Harry, the most important person of the minute in history. Because at this minute, what is going on in the scope of things is the resurgence of communism everywhere. And people say, oh, you're an alarmist. Well, it's critical theory. And it is branched out. And most of us by now, if we follow this stuff, know what cultural Marxism is. And we've heard about critical race theory. See, critical theory, it's all the same thing. It's what Karl Marx called dialectical materialism. It's a re-expression of the dialectic. But the simplest way to understand that is self-fulfilling prophecy. I'm a quarter Chinese. If I believed that things that happened to me negatively in life were because I was part Chinese, how would you convince me otherwise? If every bad thing that happened in my life was because I was a quarter Chinese, then that's the reason. There's really nothing you can do about that. And if you try to explain to me, right, that's not so, that you really aren't a racist because of the way you treated me, it was because of something else, well, you're just a racist and don't know it. You have white privilege. You are all racist. There's a famous picture circling the internet, right, with the lady teaching critical theory as supposedly race education. And on the marker board, big letters, all white people are racist. And everyone else says, well, isn't that statement racist? No. Racism is whatever you want it to be. It's pancake syrup labels, it's Uncle Ben rice. I mean, seriously, it is. If you're offended by it, it is. And the way the dialectic works, nobody can tell you otherwise. If they do, they're part of your oppression. That's why conservative black people are suddenly white, or they're white supremacists and in league with white people. The whole thing seems quite farcical. But this is the circle of the dialectic. If you believe those are the reasons, those are the reasons. And so now it is expanded. It can be because of your race, because of your gender identity, which is now fluid. It's the patriarchy, it's the supremacy, and black people are white supremacists. Police are all bad because of the nature of being police. The backwardsness of good and evil. There's no better patron saint of this culture than the guy who holds a gun on the womb of a pregnant woman and is worshipped by a culture that murders millions of babies in the name of human rights. But this is critical theory. It's self-reinforcing. It's whatever you label it to be, and conveniently, nobody has the right to explain what really happened to you, because then they're white-splaining or mansplaining. So in this messed up palace culture in which Harry grew up, right, he had all of these various human problems. And he saw that other people had human problems, and people that he cared about had real human problems despite all of the things he was born with, that he was born with everything, metaphorically. He meets Meghan, who's an American, who, and I'm not going to get this right, I think that she's like part African-American, she's dark complected, nice looking girl. That's about what I know. I should say woman, I suppose, because that was kind of condescending, I guess, in some circles. He marries this woman who is a woman of color, who is clearly steeped in this self-reinforcing prophecy. I think I've told the story before when I worked at the hospital years ago, and I saw a lady who happened to be black with her child, and her child ran into the street, and she grabbed her child, and she said, "You can't do that. White people don't care if they hit you." That has stuck with me all these years. I bet you it stuck with the kid. So all the times I was almost hit in traffic was because I was a quarter Chinese. Well, no, I don't look Chinese. And if I did, I don't think I'd believe that. But your mother teaches you that. And then every time some idiot almost hits you, this culture of everything's about my race and everything bad that happens to me is because of my race. And I'm sorry, there are people, Jesse Jackson, Al Sharpton, there are people who have an industry of racial oppression. They can't let it go. Everything has to be. It doesn't matter if you killed 16 police officers. You get shot in that exchange, they're going to be there to march in your funeral because you were wronged somehow, because you were only a criminal because of the white supremacist oppressive culture. Boy, implant in there capitalist culture that caused you to be a thief and a criminal murderer. It's exactly the same dialectic. It is communism. So Harry ends up with a woman who enlightens him to all this, right? And this is all relatively innocent. He loves her. They learn about each other. He learns to see the world the way that she does. First, angry that people maybe at a dinner party in England weren't nice to her like they should be. Maybe they were just preoccupied, but it's suddenly because of her race. Suddenly everything's become, and now his eyes are opened by this epiphany that everything that's been going on in the world is about race all the time, except it's not. But he's now a member of a critical theory cult that believes that it all is. And now not only does he see the world of treating her that way through her eyes, now he begins to see, think of all the ways he was wronged. Even though he's white and born in nobility, the way that he was wronged and the expectations put upon him and the duties and obligations just to what? To support a white racist patriarchal system that was oppressing people like the woman he loves. The guy was born into this and had everything. And because of the influence of critical theory, he's able to be on TV and the internet every day whining about oppression. This is the farce that's enlightening. This is the thing that makes him the most important guy in the minute in history. If this thinking can infect someone that was literally born with everything, anybody can be taught to look at the world that way. And once they are, it's just like trying to, I gotta check the meat, deprogramming people from things like white supremacist cults. When you've been taught propaganda that Jews run everything. Well, there's a sizable minority of Jewish people in America. Every time you spot one, it's confirmation of that, right? Oh, I saw one at the radio station, and I saw one on TV in the background. Oh, another one of those actors in Hollywood turns out to be one. Oh, it's further and further proof. It's also further and further proof of Islamic fundamentalism, terrorist ideology. All those people in the West, Christians are evil, horrible people, they're perverts. We're over here saying it's a Christian nation, conservatives are, and all they have to do is turn on MTV to see the depravity. So, self-reinforcing. We told them it's a Christian country, and then we had naked people on a float in a parade having sex in public. They don't know how to jive this dissonance or understand the nuances of the culture. If you've been taught to view things that way, the world is full of evidence for any of this stuff. if you already believe it, and especially with critical theory, if you've learned the dialectic, if you've learned how to work it so that everything fits that bill, everything fits that bill. So though, it may seem funny and amusing, and, people are having a good old time yucking it up on Facebook and other socialist media, talking about how crazy Harry and Meghan are, they are a perfect microcosm, a perfect example for us to get insight into how this works. And I hope they keep talking. At first, I wanted them to shut up. At first, I was like, these people, who cares about them? We separated from them centuries ago. Who cares? And the more they're talking, the more I'm thinking, they are telling us very important stuff. Maybe the most important stuff about critical theory, just by their conduct and what they keep rambling about. I hope they keep talking. But I really hope they figure it out at some point. I mean, it's the human aspect of this is what a tragedy to live your life that way, to live your life believing those things and seeing them everywhere and always looking for them and always being miserable and again, because for no reason, overwhelmingly for things that are absolutely not connected to the things that they imagine. It's all in their head. In a sense, it's an almost Buddhist sort of issue, the reality that we create by our disposition towards the outside world. If that's how you interpret it, what a miserable condition to be in. But anyway, I'm almost done with my, see that I can multitask. But thanks for being here if you're watching. And those are my thoughts, my review of my television review, I think I'll put it up, of Harry and of Meghan, and why they are important people right now in the moment, what we can learn from them. Don't be critical theorists.